Our next presentation is The Future of Commerce. Our speaker is Charles Nicholls, SVP of SAP Upscale Commerce for SAP. He will tell us how to prepare your CPG business for the new normal. Charles, take it away.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, what is the new normal? Well, that's a tricky question, isn't it? I was just listening in to the last presentation, so I'm conscious for those of you who are carrying through from the last one, I will try not to overlap. But mainly, I'm going to be talking really here about what does the world look like from an e-commerce point of view? What does that mean for CPG? How can we go direct? How can we do that quickly? What are some tips and techniques? What are new business models that are emerging from this kind of a landscape? So hopefully that will capture your interest, and that'll be interesting. I'll try and make it light as much as I can as we go through. So a little bit of new reality, a little bit of 3 ways to go direct to consumer fast. We're going to look at continuity commerce, the concept of auto-ship as a new normal, the whole series of reasons why that is a trend that's getting accelerated. And then I've got a little bit of a technology story to tell you about. We have a new commerce platform designed specifically for direct-to-consumer and consumer packaged goods companies. So I'll give you a little bit of a quick overview to that. But even if that's not relevant, it'll give you a flavor of how some of these kind of approaches can be looked at. So across the world looks different. You see this in retailers struggling. But in general, we can say that this is an acceleration of lots of different trends. Acceleration of those retailers that have previously been struggling. The chart on the left, I think, which was in the Washington Post, 3 of those are in bankruptcy, but it shows that the footfall change in footfall effectively for U.S. retailers where they have poor credit ratings. It shows that there is actually a lot of distress anyway on the high street. We've talked about that for a long time. The second key trend, I guess, is acceleration of direct consumer. You see this lots and lots and lots of online shopping. In our business at SAP, we work with many of the world's largest consumer packaged goods companies. Many of those who've been selling only directly before are in discussions with us really around how they can go direct faster, because they need to sort of change the way that they go to market, given the new environment that we're sitting in. It also sometimes comes through digital transformation, and as a result, the e-commerce theme in general or going digital is a big piece of that. We also see accelerating change across industries. So will we see a significant rise, for example, in the consumption of electric cars coming out of this? My sense is yes. I haven't seen the evidence and data points for this yet. I mean, the previous speakers talked about the healthy living approach and more environmentalism and more green and organic kind of demand. I think this is an inevitable conclusion coming out of this world, where we've seen cleaner air pollution or less air pollution, I should say, and increasingly a sort of a general concern really about the world that we live in. So I think that the environmental thing is the next big crisis that will come beyond this. And I don't think that's just going to go away suddenly because we've had a COVID interval. Of course, how long that COVID interval lasts is very different. And what is the new normal? Well, that's difficult. I mean, you can go pick your quote from various different places, but it's very clear that this is here to last for a little while. So what does that kind of mean for consumers and how's consumer behavior changing? Because it's always a great place to start, which is, so what's the customer doing and how are they behaving? And I sort of group those into 3 sort of broad areas: supply disruption, social distancing, and working from home. All things I'm sure you're all very familiar with personally, but at a consumer level, you roll that up, you see that happening. So the first one really in supply disruption, let's think about hoarding. I mean, governments have been behaving badly when it comes to hoarding, in particular around PPE and those sorts of things. It's not just consumers, but if I remember back to my grandmother, who was an eye surgeon in World War II, that's probably things like a long, long time ago, but I can remember when I was a child going and visiting her, and the first thing she'd make me do would be wash my hands. And of course, now that's our new normal, isn't it? And when I cleared out her flat some years later, after she had passed away, I found boxes and boxes and boxes of soap, years' supply of soap, from somebody who, as a surgeon, clearly was very focused on hygiene and cleanliness and avoiding infection. That was a critical supply that she wanted to hoard. So these behaviors can tend to hang around, and where there has been scarcity of supply, we'll tend to see more hoarding of behavior. It also will drive searching a behavior. Find it, if you can't find it locally, then find it online. We see that wherever you have scarcity of product anyway, irrespective of COVID, in particular those products where the switching costs are high, or so anything that touches the body of the skin, consumers are very reluctant to change brand and would rather almost go without than try a new one. So that tends to drive an online kind of shopping behavior. And also in some cases moving into sort of buying that product on subscription. So for example, if you have sensitive skin and you don't like perfume deodorant, or you don't want XYZ ingredient in it, then, and you can't get that locally, then it may be just easier to get it online. In that case, then, well, why wouldn't I have it delivered monthly or quarterly or whatever makes sense? So changes in behavior there. Obviously, also changes in behavior when it comes to physical shopping. Shopping less in store. Some consumers here not shopping in store at all. 30% not shopping in store at all, which is during kind of the lockdown period, which is a pretty high number. Sort of a whole shift towards contactless payments. Some retailers only accepting contactless. I know in Europe, where I'm based, contactless is bigger than the US, but not wanting to touch things, not wanting to touch screens, all these sorts of things becoming very relevant. So whether that's curbside pickup or whatever, but all these things are important. And then obviously more online shopping because we are social distancing, etc. We're also thinking about working from home and how that impacts commerce. Home delivery then becomes different from work delivery. How do we make that work correctly? What happens when they can't get to the doorbell, or they don't want to open the doorbell because they're vulnerable, all this sort of thing. Again, continuity comes in here as well, which is it's just easier and more convenient for these things to be delivered on an automatic kind of basis. And there's also another trend as well, which we picked up, which is people shopping more locally, not necessarily wanting to move, go far afield. So this is part, and therefore, corner stores in some respects have seen a boost, at least in some built-up areas. So if that's the new normal, of course, from consumer packaged goods companies, direct-to-consumer was already a trend, a big trend, right? And arguably, it was beyond the tipping point. Maybe they just, the COVID era acts as an accelerant for it. If you look across a series of different numbers here, online sales, CPG products in the US last year, about $60 billion in revenue, up 35%. In fact, most of the growth coming out of consumer packaged goods in many respects, many segments are relatively flat or at relatively low levels of growth, except for online. And the online stuff is growing very rapidly. You can see this all the way through. Whilst the share is still relatively small, it's growing rapidly, and therefore, as we look forward, it's assumed that's going to continue to be rapid growth. And at the moment, then we have a little bit of an accelerant, which is making that go a little bit faster. Of course, this trend to direct-to-consumer is not new. It's been around a while. It's been fueled by huge amounts of venture capital, which have been backing new D2C natives, driven by a few significant exits early on across lots and lots of different categories. The picture on the left, sort of, which comes from the CD Insights guys, basically paints a picture really about how a big consumer packaged goods company is being nibbled at from many different directions. It's also interesting to note actually how many of these have an environmental or clean living kind of a twist, recognizing that there are consumer segments there that maybe they can't get those products locally. It has big implications on packaging going forwards, all those sorts of things. So good natured being one, juice and beauty being another, sensible organics being another, et cetera, and you can go on around that particular one. Now, when we think about direct-to-consumer, not all initiatives are equal. Some are super successful and some less so. And what makes the difference between a Harry's, a Dollar Shave Club, and a one that's far less successful, is a combination of things. It's not just an e-commerce system. It's not just the ability to ship individually and handle returns and all those sorts of things. It's about a focus on the end-to-end experience. It may be about having, fewer product lines, that work really well, and a really slick experience, great customer acquisition, great understanding of the customer, phenomenal service, no quibble returns, all these sorts of things, which basically make the experience different. So you have to think beyond just the technology, the overall value proposition, really, for these things to fly. So if we think about how can we go direct fast, right? We have this new urgency to do things quicker. So what can we do? What can we do differently? Well, it's sort of 3 different ways of thinking about it. So first of which is not really a true direct consumer. It's a little bit of a halfway house, which might be a baby entry if you've not done it before, which is actually to look at mom and pop stores. So some of these mom and pop stores are seeing significant spikes in demand as a result of lockdown and those sorts of kind of approaches. And one of the ways that you can deal with these guys is that you can actually then start going direct to consumer, but at the case level, rather than going to the individual product level. And in many cases, this makes a whole ton more sense. It's easier to handle from a logistics point of view. You're dealing with smaller businesses. You're still doing cash orders, so they're paying up front. And of course, the benefit there is these are the guys who normally have to go to the cash and carry, and you're ensuring consistent supply. Make sure then they don't have out of stocks, because you can sell these things on subscriptions, etc., auto delivery, auto prompt, and you're maximizing, your shelf space and wallet share effectively. So this is one way to look at it. This is simpler and easier and quicker, effectively, than going pure play direct to consumer. It's sort of effectively going direct to small business. So lots of examples of that. It could be bed and breakfast or Airbnbs or these sorts of things when the world starts going back more towards normal. Another route you can look at, because one of the challenges is often the logistics side. If you're used to shipping by the pallet, then shipping individual items doesn't work so well. So you can outsource that to a third-party logistics player, and you can do that relatively quickly. You can get those things set up really quite fast. There are many of them about. All of the commerce platforms pretty much connect into all of the 3PLs. It's not hard to make work. You can make these things work quite easily. We do that. We have close relationships with some. You get set up in a few days. Not big and complex. The other thing you might consider, of course, is selling. Using that model, using bundles. That it helps you increase the average order value, reduce the numbers of SKUs, so that makes it more efficient as a way to start. You can see this, for example, Pepsi just launched with Frito-Lay a new snack store where they're selling individual bag of chips. Individual bag of chips, you have to go a long way to get $50 free shipping and things like that. So maybe bundling these things up and makes a whole ton of sense, which is increases the AOV and reduces the SKU count. The other one to look at is continuity, and I'm going to come back and talk about continuity in the next few slides, because it's a really important business model. It's different, right? It's also incredibly profitable. You can start with a simplistic way of looking at this. This could be as easy as a replacement water filter for a fridge, for example, where otherwise people wouldn't do that, or they wouldn't find the right part or the right model. Very high stick rates for these kinds of things. It's just easy. I sign up for it. It comes in the mail. Bang, I know I've got to change it. This is very, very profitable business, if you can get into the replenishment area. It also allows you to begin to think about owning the shelf effectively, which is, I want to own the bathroom shelf, or I want to own the snack cupboard, or I want to own the cleaning cupboard, or all these sorts of things, because it allows you to then create bundles of products which people then kind of subscribe to. So I said the economics are important. This gives you a sort of sense of what you can achieve. Obviously, mileage always varies, but in essence, at the end of a 12-month 12-month program, for a product line that you then put on continuity, where people are then buying on a recurring basis, where you're buying on a subscription, then you can see the number of orders per year increasing maybe 1 to 2 to 3 to 6. You can get maybe as many as 25% of your customers buying this way. This can increase your product line revenue by 20, 25%, something like that. And given you now have forward visibility of demand, what products you need to be. It can eke out some efficiencies in the way that you're buying on the supply side, then you can see 30-40% kind of increases in product line profitability. These are really, really significant numbers. So it kind of then begs the question, well, so what is that? How do you do that? And how does it work? I mean, here's an example on the right-hand side where, this is tea as a service effectively, and we make this really, really simple. You just have a drop-down box that says single delivery. Do you want it weekly? Do you want it monthly, etc.? You can build in discounts, appropriate, etc., all the same thing. One tap on the Apple Pay button, bang, 12.5 seconds later, the customer has signed up for a subscription. I mean, wow. One of the lessons is make these things simple, take the friction out of the process, make it easy to manage, make it easy to pause. I can go in and manage my continuity orders very easily. I can say, okay, I don't need that. I want to skip it for a month or whatever, something like that, because I've got more than enough. Making that stuff easy is really, really important. So make it easy is critically important. There's also an element of AI in here as well, certainly in the way that we tackle it. The way these programs work is that if we're aiming at that 25%, where does that 25% after a year come from? How do we get those numbers? The way it works is ballpark, you can say, from somebody who lands on a product detail page on a continuity product, you get about 6%, something like that, will sign up at that point, okay? Now, the magic comes, of course, because in fact, there is another 6% that you can get by triggering an email to all those who bought on a single delivery but didn't buy a continuity subscription at that point. If you nudge them at the right time, relevant to that product, which means you need to understand the consumption patterns for that product and where this individual is and all the rest of it, we just make that easy, do that for you automatically. You get another 6% at that point by nudging them then, and of those, sort of 1 in 6, so effectively 1% of the total then come through at the right time. Now, if you roll the clock forward 12 months, effectively, this allows you what gets you up to 25% of your customers effectively can buy on this, because you're building little cohorts effectively over time, and it begins to increase. Of course, there's a downside, right? The downside is churn. And churn we can tackle in a different way, in that if we understand where the churn is, then we can intervene just before a churn point. So we call this surprise and delight, and it allows you, for example, to nudge the customer with a nice little surprise just before a churn point, which excites them. Oh, that's fantastic! Isn't that great? Here you've got an example of the chai tea. So as simple as an email, which would be a surprise email sent just before the dispatch of the churn point, which is then saying, well, spice up your tea time with these chai tea biscuits, and here's a great recipe, right? Get engagement that way. Another example would be maybe very current at the moment would be if you're selling something like dog food. As a consumer, you don't want to buy those great big sacks of dried dog food all the time. Getting them home from the store is not great, especially at the moment, given the experience in store is rather unpleasant. And some people are not shopping at all, don't want to go out. Still, the dog needs feeding. So selling dog food in that way, may make a whole ton of sense, on a direct consumer basis. And then, the surprise and delight could actually be a physical gift. So maybe you put a dog chew in. Then the owner gets the dog food and gives the dog chew to the dog, and the dog's happy. Yeah, I'm happy, fantastic. Dog's happy, owner's happy, everybody's happy, right? So, and that maybe if that's a new product line you wanted to introduce, then this is a great way to do a digital first introduction, gives you some sales data, and then when you're going back to negotiate with physical stores, you can negotiate better shelf space or all the rest of it, based upon the sales data you've seen and the popularity. You can also liquidate surplus inventory that way too. You can put in, little gifts of things that you actually want to move. I've got too much inventory of this, therefore I'm going to use that as my surprise kind of thing, etc. So this is kind of how to make these kind of programs work and how the maths works. In terms of different ways of thinking about continuity, first of all, these things are growing really fast. This is 100% growth over the last 5 years. You can see this in different areas. Some of these are around replenishment, which are the examples we've been talking about. There's also curation as well, right? So, this is I want a box of X, right? It could be like Birchbox or something of that nature, where I get a curated item, and again, easy returns and all those sorts of things. But there's in particular sort of apparel, food, beauty, makeup, all those kind of areas, very, very, very relevant areas here. One of the secrets about continuity commerce, one of the secrets actually about direct-to-consumer, don't tell anyone, right, is the recurring element, right? If you get the recurring element right, then you build a long-term, ongoing relationship with customers, and that's really one of the things about direct-to-consumer that we should be thinking about, which is that it's not just about the individual ability to sell once, but e-commerce, the secret of e-commerce is actually about selling over and over and over again. It's not about selling once, and the cost of acquisition is so high, and it keeps going up and up and up. You know, as the advertising market in online is consolidated, really around, you know, relatively few sort of players, you know, social media kind of players, then the prices have gone up. That makes the ultimately the cost of acquisition higher, and therefore it's very hard to turn a profit on a first sale, right? And the second sale, you begin to amortize the cost of acquisition across two sales, the third sale, it's such the same thing, and you can begin to drive, you know, customer level profitability that way. So one of the reasons that while selling on marketplaces gets you, you know, significant volume, and that undoubtedly, you know, may well be part of your mix at the moment, but if you don't know who the individual customer is and you don't have consent to contact them, and you can't then sell on an ongoing basis, you're getting volume, but not necessarily volume and margin, and potentially with the cost of acquisition being, you know, quite significant. So that's kind of a little bit of an overview of you know, what does direct-to-consumer look like and why it's important and how the world's changing. Now, what I want to do now is I want to give you a little bit of an intro into some of the things that we've been doing here. Now, this is, we built a new commerce platform designed specifically for direct-to-consumer, with some of those concepts built in. And I thought I'd just share a few of those concepts for you and show you what I mean by when it's specific for direct-to-consumer, what does that mean? That will also help you think about, you know, some of the dimensions of the things that the questions you need to be asking if you're looking at kind of direct-to-consumer platforms. So just a quick summary, and so you know where I'm coming from. This is a next generation B2C commerce platform designed for direct-to-consumer and specialty retail kind of use cases. Super low total cost of ownership, ability to start really quickly, you know, get live in a matter of a few days, few weeks, that kind of order, and you know, upgrades built in and all these sorts of things, so that, you know, you can have a pay-as-you-go model, so you can experiment and do kind of digital transformation things if you want to, rather than it all has to be a big bang, right? People are very nervous about doing a big bang right now because the world looks different. I need to get moving quickly, so that's important, and I want to be able to grow with it as it starts, rather than just have this big, you know, upfront issue that you've got to deal with. The second thing that's really important right now, I think this is general across all aspects of marketing, is we've got to be mobile first, because that's where our consumers are. If our consumers are on a small screen, we need to do something which is optimized for the small screen, and many commerce experiences are not optimized for the small screen. They're optimized for a big screen with a keyboard and a mouse. It doesn't work so well. So we think about, you know, rich mobile experiences. We also think about them going all the way through into the store as well. So we recognize that, you know, you have a research online, buy and store, all those kind of journeys, and the mobile device is always with you, so you want to be able to find the product in store and those sorts of things nice and easily. So we also have built-in order management. Now, when you understand commerce, order management is really a critical element of it. You know, this is where you have your inventory coming in. This is where you have your recurring orders going out. This is where the connection happens into your back office. This is where the magic happens in getting orders out to your warehouse management system. So this is the critical component. And many commerce platforms, amazingly, are relatively weak on order management. And in our case, you know, that we consider that to be a core strength. And that enables us to do things like continuity commerce, which we've been talking about, which is normally a custom development, or you know, you need to bring in a third-party module or something like that, all built in, make it nice and easy. We've also built a ton of AI in as well, and we make this really easy to work across a wide range of different devices, everything from a mobile native app, you know, for your best customers. So customers on continuity, make it really easy for them to manage their subscriptions, these sorts of things. Native apps, perfect, right? But not all customers are ready to download a native app, and therefore maybe some of them will have a progressive web app, which is like a native app, but it runs in a browser. So, you know, it runs anywhere a browser runs, so it runs on a tablet, runs on a desktop, etc., etc., etc. We also have in-store kiosks as well. Now, in-store kiosks are particularly interesting for CPG. Think about an aisle end, and you can put a digital terminal there where you can actually sell a continuity subscription for a gift box or the snack shelf or something like that, where you can then share the subscription back with the retailer. This is a way that you can eliminate conflict because it's all part of the same thing. So you can offer the same thing in store if you want to. Now, I said that many of these experiences don't work very well on mobile, and that's so true. You'll notice from your own experience that shopping on mobile isn't great today if you've got radio buttons or drop downs, or you've got checkout, all these sorts of things to do. Doing that with fingers, at least my fingers are fat fingers on a small screen doesn't work very well. And this is really because these experiences were designed for a landscape screen with a keyboard and a mouse, and you then try and rotate them through 90 degrees, squeeze them down onto a small piece of real estate. It doesn't work very well. So whatever you do, make sure you are aiming at mobile first, for sure, as your starting point. And when you do that together with a visual navigation or mobile app-like experience, which is sort of, if you like, I think of this as sort of a tap-buy kind of experience. That's really what you're aiming at. It's going to be that easy, take away that amount of friction, where you can just navigate with your fingers through different product categories. Oh, I love that. Yeah, bang, tap on the Apple Pay button or Google Pay button or whatever it is. And then, 12.5 seconds later, it's checked your face or thumbprint or whatever other authentication, it's on its way, picking up all of the billing, shipping, credit card details from the device itself. Right? It's just magic. When consumers do that, they love it. It becomes their preferred method of checking out. You see a much higher conversion rate on mobile as a result. Now, making this stuff work, if you're a CPG, well, that's actually a little bit more tricky. Right? There is some magic to making commerce work. And as a result of that, one of the things that we looked at when we were building a new platform as you would from scratch is, well, how can I use AI to make a merchandising task in particular much, much easier? E-commerce tends to have a lot of rules. Just take fulfillment rules, for example. These are very rigid. If this, then do that, right? Of course, retail data isn't rigid. It tends to be quite volatile. As soon as you run a promotion, right, all bets are off. And as soon as when you eyeball the data, the promotion sees massive spikes and swings and all this sort of stuff. So rules don't adapt very well to those kind of environments. But that's the way most commerce works today. Merchandising too it tends to be a manual task. It's one of the things that consumer packaged goods companies sort of underestimate in terms of going direct, which is actually what does it take to merchandise these things correctly, to make it look good, also to make sure you're selling the right stuff, balance the inventory levels you've got effectively in the business with with what you're promoting and all these sorts of things. So there's a mixture there. And then finally, optimizing these things is challenging. When I get called in to troubleshoot e-commerce sites, as I do from time to time, it's almost invariably a consumer packaged goods site that I'm troubleshooting, and a lot of that is because it underestimates kind of some of the hardness, really, that you think this looks easy and yeah, I can take a team from that, and that's not. It's always a little bit more difficult. So when we were thinking about a new capability, with CP in mind, then we started really by putting AI at the heart of this, so that effectively each individual gets a store just for them, created automatically based upon what we need to sell as a brand, but also what she's interested in as an individual. It's doing that balancing act between what they're interested in, but what we need to sell, right? What we need to sell to drive profitability, to make sure that we're showing her the right categories, which then drives multi-category buying, which obviously drives profitability and all those sorts of things. So how do we do those kinds of things, and we do those automatically? Well, lo and behold, we've taken concepts which are probably very familiar to you, such as the planogram, and we've transported those into the physical world, into the digital world, from the physical into the digital world. So concepts such as the end cap or third shelf and all these sorts of things are embedded in exactly the same way, but embedded in software, where basically, the products we want to promote, we can automatically promote. The categories we want to drive, we call them AI tailored categories, but effectively they're strike zones in the physical world. This really changes the world because, this is the science of retail that's been perfected over many, many, many years, and you guys, I'm sure, are very familiar with the way that this works. And yet, you can't change it up that often or that much, and therefore, when we go into the digital world, we can change that and make it truly individual. We can effectively have an individual planogram which changes as she navigates through the site, and that's effectively what we're doing. So the way that works is really quite simple. We take the sort of category management principles here, and we automatically switch in and out which products want to be in certain places. You can always override these and do it manually if you want to, but this is a way of managing the long tail of products, very, very efficiently. So, for example, top right-hand corner, we've got a traffic generator. It's not necessarily that product that drives the profitable order, but showing that product subsequently drives a profitable order, even if it's a different product, right? So therefore, show that product more because it's driving the right kind of behavior. The same thing if we've got fast rising inventory. Why wouldn't we automatically show certain products and balance exposure? So we're selling products which we need to sell more, we're exposing them more so that we can balance inventory and sales much more evenly. Equally, a hidden gem product. So this is a product which isn't shown that much. We have inventory, but it doesn't get much exposure. But when we do expose it, it actually sells really quite well. Well, in that case, you'd have to do a whole ton of spreadsheet work to try and figure that out. When we just expose that for you automatically, make that much easier. Also think about sets and how you sell sets. Now, we talked about bundles earlier on and why that's important. It helps you drive up the average order value, makes your shipping easier, makes your warehousing easier. If you're using a 3PL as the part of the logistics provider, reduces your overall cost of fulfillment, those sorts of things as well. So we do that in a couple of different ways. We can do that either curated, where you sort of build a collection, and then you can sell a complete collection with a one-tap pay, or you buy the individual items in a collection, or you can do it in an AI way, which is effectively like the end cap, these are products which we dynamically want to change based upon the products that we actually need to sell, and those can be done automatically. And one of the reasons that consumers go to brand sites versus go to a marketplace or go to retailer sites is they want brand content, right? Rich content. It's the how-to, how do I use it? It's the recipes that go around, the chocolate or whatever else it is that makes that experience so much richer. This is where they're going to get the deep product information. So we actually blend content and make it entirely shoppable in a very elegant way, so that you don't have to have as you see with some direct consumer sites, you see effectively a brand site, content site, and then you have the shopping store and it's separate, right? It shouldn't be. They should be completely blended together, so the lines are seamless, so that you can go from product to content or content to product, or browse and discover and explore. Maybe you're doing that through a recipe, but then the recipe then contains the ingredients, and then with a simple button I can press the buy button and I can then just move out of that kind of very easily. So this is kind of the way to think about how content and product really should merge and be sort of completely seamless in the way that they work. So one final thought as well is then, how do you actually manage categories in an online world? Well, you can do that using tools to do that. In our case, we have category and product performance, which we then view graphically. This is normally the world of spreadsheet crunching. You can just make that very easy to then understand what products you've got, what categories you've got, what products you've got. You can drill from product down and category down into products. You can see the ones that are performing well. And if you identify areas that need fixing, so for example this one is underexposed, then you can just put them in the action cart on the right hand side and make it actionable. You can equally see category drift as well. So if you've got categories under fire, then you can see that's beginning to tail off and go in a particular direction, then you can take action from it again. So making the whole thing actionable is kind of really important. So hopefully that's been a useful kind of romp through direct consumer in the era of COVID, and a little bit of what our philosophy is and some of the things that we're doing. Happy to take questions from the audience if you'd like to. So let's shoot with any questions that we've got at this point.
Sure, Charles. We've had a couple questions come in. First, the issue with selling direct is channel conflict. Have things changed really that much?
Okay, well that's a good one. So start with the easy one, shall we? Okay, so in terms of in the environment we see now, what we as SAP are seeing, given that we're a very large vendor in the space, we see just a completely different approach to this compared with if we went back to say January, pre-COVID environment. If your supply chain has been massively disrupted, so in your ability to actually get product to customer in one form or another, then I think this is something you've just got to deal with, right? And direct consumer is one of the ways that you can deal with that. It has lots and lots and lots of other benefits, like getting to know individual customers, understanding buying behavior, the ability to digitally soft launch products first. So it allows you to sort of understand what's working, what's not working, how to price, how to promote, all these sorts of things. Many of those benefits. Obviously, there's a bunch of work to do and some new skills to learn, all the rest of it. There are ways that you can mitigate the channel conflict. So, for example, I talked about the end cap with a digital shelf store where the retailer who sells the subscription effectively gets credit for the subscription. That's a very nice way of doing it. Retailers want subscription revenue as well. Their margin is thin. Subscription revenue is fantastic. You give a cut to the retailer that's done it so that you can present these in a completely different way. They don't have to be just as an alternative channel. But having said that, if right now your channels are not delivering for you, then I think the world has changed. I think everybody understands that people will go more direct. It's a great time to then try and experiment, do some learning, figure out how that works. And to some extent, we'll deal with the new normal as we emerge out of this, and undoubtedly direct consumer will be part of the new normal rather than where this was only an indirect model in the past. But great question. Keep them coming like that. We love interactive session at the end.
Sure. Another question, Charles. Are the auto ship subscription programs built in, or are they a chargeable extra?
Okay. Yeah, good question. So in many cases there can be a catch there where you have to pay extra for these things. We don't do that. In fact, the way that we price is just based upon the revenue flowing through the platform. So we price as a sort of a small percentage of what's called gross merchandise value, GMV, and that makes it that all of our interests are aligned. We're aligned in helping you make you successful, sell more. And if you sell more, then you just pay a little bit. You pay a percentage, and the percentage goes down as you sell more over time. So no, continuity is all built in. You don't have to pay any extra for that. No extra modules. You just get it out of the box, and it's really, really easy to set up. Because it's built in and because it's hardwired, you can literally just say, okay, I want to put these products on continuity, and then you set up and you then say, well, okay, I'll have it. I'll offer them weekly, and then I'll put in these discount levels, bang, deploy, and it's done. It's such a slick business model, the way that works.
Okay, one more, Charles. You mentioned fast D2C. How long does it take to go live?
Oh, well, that's a how long is a piece of string question. So it depends, right? I can give you an example of a very large consumer packaged goods company in Italy recently affected under COVID scenario. So under COVID lockdown conditions, so not ideal conditions, went live with a customized experience with deep integration into the back end, into the warehouse management systems, into SAP back end, live end-to-end in 4 weeks. You can go faster for sure, but you have to think about, am I going to go with a more vanilla out of the box? How am I going to customize it? How do I integrate into my back-end systems? You've got to make that fairly easy. And then the next big question you've got to think about is warehousing and how does all of that work? If your warehouse today is, currently used to shipping pallets, then, that's going to take some work to get them to a point where they can then ship, individual items. Maybe they can do case level. Maybe that's a baby step that we talked about earlier on. That maybe that's a good way to then start breaking into this. Or, you want to do an experiment, outsource it to a third-party logistics player, in which case you could still be up and running in 4 weeks if you wanted to, where you just outsourced it. So you can do this really quite quickly. It doesn't have to be a big, long, complicated thing. We also make it easy to do that with, kind of get started, kind of pay-as-you-go kind of contract, so that there's no big upfront ticket, which makes it a big barrier to entry. That's another one as well. At the moment, getting big projects off the ground is really difficult, right? Because of additional cost control that are in place, therefore additional levels you need to go through in the organization. So that's another factor as to when you're then thinking about this. How can I start small, prove it out, and then grow with it rather than making everything a big bang?
Okay, any more questions or to get more information about this topic, please contact Charles directly. charles.nichols@sap.com. His email address is on the screen. Thank you, Charles. That was an outstanding presentation on a very timely and important topic. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.